Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of Writing Visual Studio Extensions with Matt. That's me. The first episode of 2021, that is. I still have to get used to saying 2021. And we have a great show for you today. And as always, we have the talented James with us as producer. Hello, James. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going, Matt? It's good to see you. Oh my, it's always good to see your face kick off a new year.
You too. Exactly. This is wonderful. This is going to be a great year, and with a lot of great content, because I think all the streamers here on the .NET Live, they've all started up again, right? We're streaming full force.
It's go time. Live.net. All the shows are back in full force. We just had an amazing Xamarin community stand up to launch Xamarin Forms 5. And I think they nearly had like 1,000 people watching it. It was crazy. It was bananas. So we're back in full force. I think this week has been a little bit slower just because some people are still coming back into work. I have a few coworkers that are still off, and I am very much envious of them. But how was your holiday, Mads?
I had a very relaxing, very good holiday. I had about 3 weeks, so one of the longest holiday breaks I've ever had, and it was absolutely wonderful. What about you, James?
It was great. You know, I love the Pacific Northwest in the winter. We got some hiking in. We got some cross-country skiing in. I developed many apps for iOS, Android, and Arduino. And now I'm thinking about, can we port this application to Visual Studio?
Yes.
Imagine.
The short answer is yes.
Yes. Can you, what can't you do in Visual Studio, Mads?
Exactly.
Yeah. Imagine though, I've been building this. I've been doing a lot of spin classes. We talked about this before on last season of extensions. And imagine, Mads, you know how they have those like little bikes, like little bike pedals you can put like under your seat, like under your desk. Have you seen these?
For your arm workout or for your leg workout?
Either, yeah. Imagine if inside of Visual Studio there's like a bar, and it connects via Bluetooth, and it tells you how much your cadence is while you're going. I don't know. That'd be amazing. I'm just saying.
So totally you can do that, but you could also say like, hey, Visual Studio will like lock up unless you kind of keep going, or you have to like charge it up and then you lose I don't know, points or whatever when you're not moving.
You only get so many keystrokes per pedal.
Yeah, right.
That'd be amazing. Anyways, ideas for later in the season. We'll see.
So what happened was that I went into the office, the actual office on campus in Redmond, over the break here, because I had to pick up some things. I had some Z-Wave modules lying around in the drawer in there, and I had to like use them for something because I had a switch that broke down. If you're into home automation, you may know what Z-Wave modules are, but they're basically ways to automate your lighting and other electronics. And while I was there, I picked up a few things. So I got my little .NET robot here, and I also, and this is like kind of
wait, let me see this .NET. Where does .NET robot come from?
This.
Oh, cute.
Is this like not? See, look at this. It says .NET.
I've never seen that.
Oh, I don't know if they're official. I think they're official. I don't know. I don't know who made it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I want to show you something, and I haven't really thought about this, but I picked up some frames here. These were hanging in my office for 10 years. Actually, they were in my drawer because I no longer have, because we were in open offices, so hanging something on the wall is not that easy. But check this out. This is my very first, James, this is illustrates how big of a Visual Studio fanboy I really am. This was my very first check-in to Visual Studio source code that went into Visual Studio.
Oh, that's cool.
And I took a screenshot of it. We used cruisecontrol.net for running the web team's Visual Studio builds back then, 10 years ago. And so this was me making some changes to the HTML schema that drives intelligence and validation for the HTML editor.
What was the date? Renescio is asking in the chat.
The date is May 31st, 2011. So 9 years ago.
No, 10 years ago.
Oh, 10 years. Yeah, 9.5. All right.
9.5, yeah.
So this is what I did here was I put, so if there's any HTML people out there, I put the input elements autofocus attribute in the schema. So there you have it. And then I have another printout. This one. This is the first time I made the whole build fail by one of my commits. And that's a little bit different, but similar.
Was it the first time you broke the build? Is that
I broke the build. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever, that I broke the Visual Studio build. And this is some CSS, because at the time I was the program manager for both HTML and CSS and all the web tooling in Visual Studio. And so I changed some CSS coding here. This one was, what did I do? I don't even know. I fixed some bugs in the schema. Okay, anyway.
Alex wants to know if your first commit is still in the source code.
Yes.
It is. Yep. There you go.
There it is.
Those are cool frames. I like that. It's sort of, it's sort of like people with the degrees up on the wall.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a major accomplishment, right? I mean, that's pretty awesome. I like it.
It's a huge accomplishment, right? I was the biggest fanboy of Visual Studio before I joined, and I still am. And I kind of forgot about that I had these in my drawer in the office. And so when I was in, very, very apropos, I would say, I got my mug that I got from my interns from a couple of years ago. Oh. I brought that home with me, so I can now drink from this from my home office / garage. Yeah. So this is a joke. If you know what CSS is, you'll get it.
I like it. I do. I get it. I get it. It's sort of like the cup of tea as well, but I think that one's even nicer because that's everyone that's ever trying to do CSS. It pretty much is
right.
Perfect.
I actually love CSS. I'm one of the few, but I do love it.
I can't wrap my head around it. It's hard. I have a hard time styling anything though. So myself, I mean, have you seen this hair? I mean, what's even going on here? I mean, I look like my Yeti over here. Let's just be honest. Where's it? There it is. Pretty similar.
Is that a Yeti?
As a Yeti head, yeah.
Oh, now I see it. Yeah, with the blue and the teeth inside the blue.
Yeah, this is from a Seattle artist, actually. Let me hold on. I'll get it. There's it's a little violent actually, because underneath it's actually like it's its head decapitated.
Someone chopped its head off and gave it to you, huh?
Anyways, that's a little local Seattle goodness. But yeah, anyways, cool.
So before we jump into today's topic, not that we did jump in immediately, we have been talking for a while. I got a question on Reddit. I do actually read Reddit. I don't know, James, if you read Reddit too, but there's a Visual Studio subreddit. And I do read, and today there was this question about how do you get started writing Visual Studio extensions? I've watched some of the videos that we do here, this show, but that's a little bit too advanced. I've never done it before, so I need something more beginner. And so I replied to the person with a link to a blog post, and that is about getting started. And James, I think we should do that every time. I actually put in a link at the very top of our banners, I think it's called. So if you're new to writing extensions, go check out that link. That's taking you to a blog post that explains what you need to know. It links to a video that is very introductory, like an hour of taking you through, the anatomy of an extension. And so that's a good place to start. So once you do that, if this is your first time building an extension, go do that. And you can always come back and watch all of these videos. They're waiting for you when you get back from this playlist.
Yeah, maybe we should do a live stream one week that is just you doing that. I've been doing that on my YouTube channel, which is like a Xamarin 101, where we do a lot of videos. I'll put my face back up. We do a lot of videos that are like your first whatever, but it's like 5 minutes, but it's not really telling you like here's all the other stuff you need to know, or it's these super long like 2-hour advanced topics. So I was like, I'm gonna just do 20 to 30 minute videos explaining things real in depth. So XAML, MVVM, like creating your first project, like what's all in it. Because sometimes we just skip over those basics. We could do that. That'd be a good video, I think.
Yeah. Like that. Let's do it. Okay. And so we're talking about CSS, and it's actually very another thing that's very apropos for today, because today's subject is one that's been requested since I did the first version of this, what we're doing today, which is where I was compiling Sass into CSS. So Sass is this language that is a superset of CSS that compiles into CSS so the browsers can understand it. It's actually not a compilation. It's called a transpilation. And we did that on November 6th. We did what's called a single file generator. So we produced an extension that had a single file generator that actually, let me just show you. Let's look at my screen here. So here's a web project, and I have a Sass file. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So here I have a Sass file called site.sass or SCSS.
That doesn't spell Sass, by the way.
I know that the original The original name for Sass was SASS. And then they came out with a newer syntax, and they had to differentiate them. So they gave that file extension CSS instead. But the name stuck. It was still Sass. So it's kind of confusing. If I look at properties, you can see here that on my Sass file, I do have the custom tool Sass transpiler set right here. And so because of that, whenever I make a change in my Sass file, it will spit out this file right here. Okay, so let's see if we can make a change. White space instead of normal. Let's change that to initial. I'm gonna save that. Let's see if that works. That didn't work. Or did it not update? Anyway, this is what we did last time. Oh, weird. Okay. So then the question came in from the viewer saying, well, that's cool and all that I can do that, but what if I want full control over how the file is produced? What if I want to lay down multiple files instead of just a nested CSS file? What if I want multiple nesting? What if I want other things? And that's exactly what we're going to look at today. So if you want to add stuff to Solution Explorer, like add new files to a project, and you want to control nesting of files under other files and so on, then we're going to take a look at that. So I'm going to just close down this for now. And we're going to take a look at, oh, by the way, the source code for that from last time is here. So on GitHub, /Matt Kristensen /Sass compiler. And that's the code base we're going to play with today. So that's the same code base as of November 6th, the last episode we did this. And it looks like this. So let me just show you what we do for making a single file generator, just to show you and remind you like kind of why I love doing them, because they're so darn simple. It's a single file that inherits. It's a class inheriting from a base class that's provided by the Visual Studio SDK. And look at this. This is the code. 25 lines of code, including like using statements and white space and empty lines and stuff. To convert, look, here's what it does. It converts the Sass file into CSS, and then it minifies it using a NuGet package called Uglify. And that's it. That's all the code needed. And then you just register it on the package, like what we do right here with a single line. And voila, that's it. Okay. So the reason I like to do them is because they're so simple and they get us very far with very little code, right? I think you can agree looking at this. But it's not so flexible. So if we need more flexibility, that's what we're going to do today. And, you know, I actually should, I prepared a little bit. So, but where is it? The Sass compiler. In here. So if I open this, oh, Sass compiler, there it is. Okay. So I just need a file so that I can follow along on what I'm doing here. And so that's what I am opening here on my monitor next to it. Okay. So that was generator. That was the old way of doing it. That was the single file generator. I'm now going to do a manual, like we're going to do this manually, right? So I create a folder and I put a file in there with 2 extension methods, which we're going to look at as we need them, okay? Just to let you know that it's there. And in this folder called manual, I'm going to add something. I am going to go in here onto extensibility, and I'm going to grab myself a WPF text view creation listener. And let's call that for Sass save handler. Okay, because what is a text view creation listener? Well, it is something that is being initialized every time a document is being opened. So what I want to do is I want to intercept the save command. So when people save the Sass file, that's when I want my logic to kick in and start transpiling that into CSS. Okay. So the way I do it here, we've done it in the past where we used a new command handler system. And that is the preferred way of doing it if you're targeting Visual Studio 2017 Update 6 or newer, 15.6 or newer as it's called. But if we want to support like Visual Studio 2017, all the versions, including the first one, or even earlier than that, 2015, 2013 and whatnot, we have to use a text view creation listener. That works all the way back to 2010. And so I haven't shown that, I think, before, so I'm going to just show it that way. And so this is what it looks like. So it's a MEF component. You can see that because it has an export statement right here. And when we have a MEF component, we have to make sure that we register our extension as a MEF component. So I'm going to go to assets. And we can see here that I already have a MEF component right here. I can double click that to see what that looks like. No, I can't. Actually, I have to click edit. I already have registered this as a MEF component. If I didn't, I could create new or click new button, select MEF component, project in the system, and then just the name of my project and click OK. Okay, good. If I don't do this, then Visual Studio, that's going to run my extension, doesn't know to include this class in the MEF catalog. Okay. And what are we going to target? We're going to target the content type. Okay, so how do we find out a content type of a file? So let's just create a Sass file. I'm just going to search Sass, and we have our Sass file here. So I have an extension installed called Extensibility Essentials. James, if we can get that listed up on the screen, because that is one that we want, that you always want to have installed, Extensibility Essentials. That gives you on your standard toolbar this little button, and when you click it, check out below here, it gives you information in the bottom margin of the editor. Gives you information about what's in the editor and what the selection is and so on. So you can see here, the content type here is SCSS of this file. This is an SCSS file. Okay, that's good to know. So I can just target that. It's case insensitive, so it could be uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. And then we have to figure out, okay, well, what type of text view role do we want our text view creation listener to attach to? And you can see here, there's a bunch of predefined ones. One is primary document, so that would be inside the document here. But any text host, any extension can create a window with whatever text view roles that they want. So I usually always go with primary document just because people are probably not using that, or zoomable. Zoomable means that you have this, you can zoom from this control down here. And so that just narrows it in. For instance, the output window, it's also a text view host. And I think it's also a document. So so if you just use document and in the output window you had to load a Sass file, that of course that doesn't work, right? But it's just, we just want to make sure that we don't trigger unless we have to. So I like to use primary document or zoomable. Either way, I'm just going to do zoomable today. Okay, so a few things that's worth noticing here. We are gonna grab we're gonna import something, and when we are in a MEF class, a MEF export, we can import like this, simply by just putting that in there, that attribute on top of in this case, we're gonna get the iText document factories. Let's see if I write that. Factory service, is that right? Yeah. And we're going to give that a getter and a setter. Oh, I need to call it something. How about doc service? There we go. So, because the text view right here doesn't really know much about it doesn't know about the file when the file is saved. That's an interesting thing about a text view, is that it's not bound to the file system. So it doesn't itself know much about the file that we're opening. So for that to work, we are going to get that document service, and then we're going to say if doc service try get text document. And it's going to be able to retrieve that out of the text buffer. And so a text view has a text buffer like that. And it takes an out parameter, and we're going to, no, we're going to save that to a member variable. So I'm going to have a new variable called doc like here. Let's see if that will create that. Yeah. Boom. Perfect. So I'm going to try to extract a text document out of the text buffer. And so the text buffer is where all the text is, all the characters, including line breaks and so on. That's sort of the content, the text content of your file. The text view is a WPF concept. It's a UI concept, okay? The text buffer does not know the text view exists. It has no dependency on anything WPF. But the IWPF text view, as the name implies, is a WPF concept. So what I want to do is that I want to grab that document and I want to say, hey, whenever there's a file action that occurred. So file action means the file was saved, for instance. Let's just hook up. Let's call it on save, like that. I'm going to just hook that up. But then, and here's a very important thing that we always have to do when we're dealing with .NET and we're listening to events, is that we have to make sure that we clean up after ourselves, right? Whenever we are subscribed to an event, we have to unsubscribe for it as well, so we don't get those pointers and whatnot lingering, and the garbage collector can't collect stuff from whenever we close the file, for instance. So we have to kind of do that cleanup. So let me do that right away. So I'm going to take the text view and I am going to say close. So whenever the text view is closed, we're going to say text view close. I don't like that. Here we go. And that's going to give us that text view close. Let's just move that down a little bit. And so what are we going to do? Here's what we're going to do. We are going to say, I'm going to grab that view. So var view equals, we're going to do IWPF text view from the sender. So I'm just going to grab the text view, okay? And then I'm going to say view.closed. And here we go. And minus equals, I'm unregistering that same thing. So that was text view closed. So that is the same, the very same. I'm not unregistering from the close event that I just added up here, right? So now it's cleaned up after itself. And I also want to make sure that I clean up after the file, the file action occurred event, like here, and that was called on save. That means when I close the file again, it runs this method that unregisters those event handlers. And so now things are freeing up. So that's always important to do. This is exactly how you allocate too much memory and keep it stuck in forever. So make sure you do that always. All right, so you can see here we're already kind of a lot more code, actually, or lines of code, if nothing else, than what we had in the single file generator, right? And that's the way it is. Once we want to have more power, we also have to hook up more manual stuff, and that's the case here. So what is it that we want to make sure? We want to make sure that we don't do anything unless the file was saved, right? That's the event we want to listen to. So if file action type equals here, content saved to disk or document renamed or content loaded from disk. No, we want saved to disk. That's the one we care about. So immediately we're just going to make sure that that's the only event we're looking at. And then we want to do something. So this happens on save, right? Control S. And so whenever we do something that involves something people do very often, we want to make sure that we don't block the UI thread. It has to be as fast as possible. We can't, if you save the file, Control S, we can't like take like several seconds, right, blocking the UI while we're doing the transpilation. And so we know that we want to move our logic out of the way and onto like a background thread or something like that. So let's just set that up immediately. So we want a thread helper. As our thread helper class here, let's get that one from the SDK. And we're basically just going to run async. So that basically will fire off an async task. Okay, let's see here. An async task. And in that async task, we're going to basically transpile our file. So let's do that. So let's do a wait. And we're going to transpile async, right? We're just going to pass it in the file path like that. That method doesn't exist, so let's generate it. There we go. And let's also just do file and forget. So on this call, the name of, I would just give it the name of the class, SCSS safe handle like that. So basically what we're doing here is that we are moving our transpilation step to a background thread, right? And then we're firing it off, and we don't care about whether it succeeds or not. Like you may want to change this, of course, but that's what file and forget does. It just fires it off, fire and forget, and that may or may not be the right thing to do. I'll leave that to you to decide. Now we just have to fill in our logic here. So what is it that we're going to do? We are going to compile some files here, and let's see here. What is the first thing we want to do? We want to get some options. So let's do that. So options for the Sass compiler. I already have that NuGet package installed from previously. So I'm just going to say options equals new Sass options. Let's see here. I'm doing that right. Using sharp says yeah. Options like that. Then we say options.include paths, and we want to include paths.add. And to this one, we want to add, let's say, path. Where are you? System IOs. Path.get directory of that file path that was passed in to me here. So I'm basically just telling the options, hey, go look at, make sure you include a folder where all my Sass files are when you are transpiling. And that's because what we want to do is that we want to transpile not what we read from disk, because we don't want to read from disk. It's already, the document is already open. The Sass file is already open in the editor. So there's no reason for us to go into the file system to then read everything that was just saved onto disk from disk again, and then do the translation. No, let's just take what's in the text buffer. Okay. So that's why when we do that, it doesn't know where the file is on disk. So that's what I'm telling it right here with this line. I'm saying, hey, here's the folder that contains this file that we're compiling. And then all I have to do is to say result equals, so we say sass.convert to CSS, like that. And we have our document up there in our member variable, doc.text buffer current snapshot.get text, like that. And then I just pass in the options. Did I get the semicolon? No. There we go. All right. So I hope it makes sense so far. So now I have a result that I need to save to disk, right? And now it gets a little bit hairy because there are some things that are not obvious that we have to make sure that we check for. So, but first of all, let's find out what is the file name going to be. Well, the convention I'm going with is that the file name is the exact same as the Sass file, but we just replace the extension. So instead of SCSS, it's just CSS. So we can say CSS path equals, what we're going to do, we're going to say path.change extension. And we had our file path, and the new extension is going to be .css. Okay. So now I need the DTE because I'm going to mess with some source control. And you might think, why do we care about source control? Well, because there are some source control providers out there that lock files, and you have to manually unlock them, or Visual Studio will do that for you when you edit them by opening them in the editor and start typing in them. But that's not what we're doing with the CSS file, right? We are actually, we're just kind of writing it to disk, but it could still be in source control in a way that is blocked. And so we have to check it out of source control. Just like there's some older TFS providers that will do that. And so, but what if someone saves file multiple times and multiple tasks try to save to one file? Yeah, so we could do some debouncing so that we don't have too many things going on, but the transpilation here is going to be so fast that it's unlikely to happen. But we could totally do it so that it will not, like we could debounce that call so it won't happen. It would be a problem. Like if you hit save multiple times, it would only do it if it was dirty, for instance, or something like that. Actually, it only will. I think this event only fires not when you hit Control S, but when the file is being saved. And I don't think if the file is being saved if it wasn't dirty when you hit Control S. So if you hit it twice in a row really quickly, for instance, the second time would not fire. Okay, so so I need the DTE. So how do we get the DTE? I'm going to put it up here. Smart DTE. So DTE is a service, and I'll get that by awaiting a call to async service provider. There we go. Global provider get service async. And I need DTE. I have to add the namespace, yeah. And I'm going to cast that to DT2. I'm not sure I have to, but I probably don't. I'm not doing anything. But anyway, let's just use that because that's the newer one. Now we have our DT. What is it saying? Oh, I can't use await because I'm not using async. There we go. Okay, so got my DTE, and so now I can say DTE source control dot check out item safely. Now, if you take a look at this one, this is an extension method. You can see there's an arrow right there. And that is one of the extension methods that I showed you in the very beginning. So let's take a look at that. Let's call it. We give it the CSS path right here. I'm now going to check that out. So if this CSS file exists, right, it's going to check it out of source control if it's checked into source control. So let's take a look. I'm just going to go to definition. Here we go. So I'm passing it in the file path for the CSS file path. So I'm checking, is this under source control? And is it not checked out of source control? If those are true, then check it out of source control. So if you're using Git or anything like that, it doesn't matter, right? Because Git is not blocking anything. It's all local, local edits and all that sort of stuff. But like there are some like TFS, and I'm sure there are others as well that can hook into Visual Studio that are weird. So it's just a better way of doing it, like if you do it this way. And if we really want to, we can mark the file as not read-only. So you know, we can, if we wanted to really make sure that the file wasn't marked read-only, we can remove that flag from the files using system.io. So this is just making sure, okay? And I'm doing this because every time I do something like this, and I forget to check things out of source control, someone somewhere is going to report the bug that it didn't work because they're in some version of TFS or some setting that does something. So that's always just good to do. That was a little pro tip, James.
Pro tip.
Perfect. All right. So now we transpiled, right? And we checked out of source control. The file might not even exist, but so now we can just write file.write alt text to the CSS path and result.css. Boom. How cool is that? So far so good. So what happens now is that whenever a file is saved, we produce the CSS. Whenever the Sass file is saved, the CSS file is generated on disk, but it's not included in the project, right? And it's not nested either. So let's go do that before we tackle the next step, before we run it to see what happens.
Do you know if you use file write all text all the time, but is there any performance implications, seeing that like it's going to create and write a new file every single time?
I
have this debate in my head. Frank and I debate all the time over this.
Right. I don't know, but you can always use the stream writer.
Yeah, that seems more complicated.
It's not too bad, and it is also async. So you could say, so you could do something like that. Here's stream writer, and we could give it a CSS path. And you could say, okay, encoding. Let's give it like UTF or whatever, and then you have to, do you want to append or not? Have these different. So let's just do this. So new stream writer, and then you can say, I think writer dot. Is there, yeah, write async, right? And it will take char value, char buffer, string value. We could do it this way.
I think you'd have to also check to see if the file exists, and if it doesn't exist, and create the file? Question mark? Or does
no, I don't think so.
No, okay.
So
I don't know. I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think so. So here we could do it this way. Might be that we have to say write async. Do you have to say like what are the permissions and stuff like that? Usually there's like, do you want to be able to, can other people read it while you write it? That sort of stuff. Let's just go ahead. Encoding.utf8, right? Buffer. We'll leave open. No. Buffer size. I don't know. This may work. So anyway, let's just keep it. Okay, so we now have a file on disk. We need to add it to our project. So I'm going to nest this new file, the CSS file, under my less file, right? So let's create the less file first. So I'm going to do a project item, and that's going to be the less item. So that's the parent. And for that, I'm using the DT again, solution find project item, and I'm just going to give it the file path. File path that was passed in up here, right? So that's the less file. So what is this complaining about? Oh, you want to switch to the main thread. Yeah, good point. Also because we're retrieving the DT from, like we're doing a get service call. So that's always switch to the main thread. And so now we want to get the CSS item. And it's the same thing. Find project item, CSS path. So the thing about this now is that, well, the CSS item only exists if the file that we created, the CSS file, has been added to the project. So just because something is on disk does not mean that it's in any project or any solution. And so when I say DT solution.find project item, it does not look on disk. It looks through the hierarchy, the project solution hierarchy, to look for files and folders and that sort of stuff. And so if this is the first time we're transpiling, well, the CSS item is going to be null. This doesn't exist. So I want to make sure that I do a little if statement here. So if CSS item is not null, and now we get to the second extension method, and then I check the less item here. I'm going to now try to say, so if it's different from null, or actually we don't have to call that. We can just say, I'm not going to try to add it. So I'm going to say, if less item, try to add nested file. Okay. And I'm going to give it the CSS path. And this one, we'll say out CSS item. Okay, so what am I doing now? I'm basically saying try to add the CSS item under the less item. Okay, And right now we're doing absolutely nothing with the CSS item, but I want to do that in a moment. But let's run this.
Someone was asking less or Sass.
Darn, Sass.
Also, I have an update for you. Apparently, that file dot write all text is the exact same as what you did.
No,
so on the internal, it's the same.
No, I'm doing async.
It doesn't do async. That's the difference.
Yes, exactly.
It does by default do false and then encoding. Someone said that file stream, you create a new file stream, that gives you more control if you want to keep the file open or not. But in this case, you don't want to keep it open, so it doesn't really matter. You can just do what you want to do. Yep. But the async version at least be asyncified.
Okay.
Yeah. Although they really should put in a, write all text async. I'm gonna talk to Emo about this.
Okay, so we had our site CSS right here, and I think I figured out why it didn't work before, actually, because I think I was writing I was doing the wrong file. So anyway, I'm not going to do it here because that was not what we're going to do right now. I'm going to use the test file. So remember this, when we did, I'm going to just do properties on site CSS. Site CSS was the one that had the single file generator. Test CSS does not, okay? And I'm now going to save. I'm just going to hit Control S right now. Do I need to make a change first? Nothing happened. Now, why did nothing happen? Let's set some breakpoints. This is a mystery. I want to make sure that when it opens up, oh, it doesn't even register. That looks right. Zoomable looks right. So you know what it could be? I might have prepared a little bit in advance. It might be that it needs to, let's do primary document. It doesn't really matter. But I'm just going to up the version number here just slightly because I think there is a MEF catalog update sync issue here. So, and that should be cleared when I update the version number. I'm just going to do a rebuild just because I kind of like to rebuild when I do this sort of stuff. That should do it. Typically, they would be because I would have forgotten to put the MEF component in here, but the MEF component is registered. See, now we go writing component cache. Okay, so now it's updating the MEF catalog. That's what the component cache is. It's the MEF catalog of Visual Studio. And of course, everything is slower now that the debugger is attached. And now it triggers. Good. So the breakpoint is hit. That means the file is being opened. So now I'm going to save it. Control S. I'm just going to hit that up here. This is test CSS. Yeah. Save. Yeah, and it hits in here. It's all good. I'm just going to hit like run it, and we'll see what happens. Boom. Test CSS. Right here is the CSS file. That is it compiled? It is now compiled. Look here, it says color white. And in my CSS, I'm referring to a variable that's defined in this imported one right here. Okay. So you can see it does, in fact, do the right thing. And it does the right proper nesting. So let's see exactly how that nesting worked. Let's close this down. Okay, so where's that? Try add nested file. Let's take a look. This is the thing that added that CSS file to the project. And here's how it works. So it checks for whether or not, so the parent here in this case is the Sass file, right? The thing that I save, the thing that I edit. It's just going to check is there a containing project. So if I just open a loose file, a standalone file, or a MISC file, as it's called, like the official thing to call files, that if you just say Control O for open, like open file, and it's not part of any project or anything. It's called a MISC file, MISC for miscellaneous. And they don't have a project, so we don't want to do anything there, right? So we want to make sure that we have a project. So if the Sass file has a containing project, like if it's not null, right? And also, if the CSS file, in this case, the nested file path here, that's the CSS file, the one I produce on disk. It tries to find that. Is it already part of the solution, like other project? If it is already part of it, sorry, if it's not, because it's null, it returns null, so it can't find that project item, then it does the nesting. Okay? And it simply just says parent, the Sass file, project items.add from file, and that is it. Okay? That is it. So I feel like I think maybe this one should be down here, actually. The return true. Okay. So it's very, very simple to do this with the DTE. Now remember, the project system is UI bound. Okay. These APIs are UI bound. You can't interact with the project system on the background thread. So we're going to say, hey, throw if you're not on the UI thread. This is the safe thing to do. So it's always going to marshal back up to the UI thread. Or it's going to, well, we don't want it to marshal automatically up to the UI thread. We want to schedule it for execution on the UI thread whenever the UI thread has a time to do it that's optimal, right? Because this doesn't have to be this doesn't have to be a synchronous operation. It can be async. It can be delayed by like 50 milliseconds. No problem. No one would ever know. Okay, so that's really cool. But we're going to take it one step further. We're going to minify this file as well, because now I have my CSS, but I want to make sure that I remove all white space. I want to optimize it so that it takes up as little space on disk as possible, so that when people in the browsers, they load up my website and they request the CSS file, that it's as small as possible. So we save bandwidth. We're respectful of our users, right? We have the site load faster. We're respectful of our users, the visitors to our page. Many places in the world, you still pay, and especially for mobile, you pay by the megabyte or gigabyte download. So it's a matter of respect as well, that we make sure to optimize wherever we can. And so let's do that. And I'm going to do that in here. I'm going to create a min file. So I'm going to kind of do this again. I'm going to create a new file, but this time I'm going to nest this new file under the CSS file. Okay, so we're going to do like nesting of nesting. So I'm going to minify it. So the result here is the minified, and that we need to get our oclify, which is noclify. The NuGet package is called noclify. So noclify the CSS, and we just get the result from up here. And let's just convert that into, let's see here, let's just convert that into bytes. We need that in a moment. So we're going to take our result. So let's get our encoding, because we already have that encoding. UTF-8.get bytes, and we're going to throw in the minified.code. So this minified.code contains the CSS file that has been optimized. Okay, so that was just that one line that optimized that entire CSS. So that was kind of wonderful. All right. Okay, and then we create that into a byte array. Let's also get a path, because we now need to change the file extension. We can't just be .css. We're going to do a min path here, and we're going to do the same trick, path.change extension, and instead of so CSS path, instead of .css, we're going to do .min.css. That's kind of industry standard. That's how that works. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to check that out of source control, like in a safe way. Check out of source control safely. And that was the min path, just to play it safe. And then I guess we could do like we do up here. Do this asynchronously. So writer, I probably can't use that, right? I have to use another. Oh no, it's scope, so I can use that same name. Wonderful. So I'm gonna write on my min path, and what am I gonna write? Write async, it takes a byte array. Hang on. If I do it this way, I guess I don't have to deal with the bytes. This is just old habit. Because the CSS, I can just write async, it takes a string. Yeah, and the CSS is a string. Okay. Haha. And then all we need to do is to make sure that we nest this new min file under my CSS file. So CSS item dot try add nesting file min path. And oh, it's an out, so it takes an out. But we kind of don't need whatever item is coming out here. So it's going to return me a project item. So that would be the min item, right? So if I wanted to do something with the min item afterwards, I could do something there, but I'm not doing anything. So the way to ignore whatever the out parameter is to simply just put it into an underscore like this. We also return whether or not, we don't care if it returns true or false here. What is this complaining about? Minified. Oh. Minify.code. There we go. And this is going pretty fast. I see here Steffi has like a string replace idea here for how do you remove white space without using a NuGet package. And Steffi, I will say, yeah, you can use string replace. I actually wrote a blog post like 12 years ago on exactly doing that. I think it uses some regex too for the purpose of minifying CSS files. So that is totally an option. Totally. Okay. Again, it was writing the component cache because we have an update. So that's always a good sign when you see that. All right, so let's make a change here. We have Sass, and then we have our CSS file. Let's just delete our CSS file here. Let's get rid of that. So now we have our Sass file. I'm going to save it, Control S, or no, let me just save it like this. It should produce 2 files for me, and boom, it did. The CSS file and a minified version of that CSS file. See that? No comments, all one line, no white space, all sorts of optimizations. So Trashman, how slow Visual Studio is, that's a very good point. Because when we have our debugger attached, here, let me delete this. When we have our debugger attached, we actually don't get a good feel for the actual user experience of using our extension in this case. Because once we attach the debugger, everything, oh, I forgot to do one more check. Everything becomes slower. I forgot that here we need to check for CSS item from null. All right. I kind of alluded to that a little bit when we started out, but I want to make sure that we do it here. And then I'm just going to run my code cleanup here. Boom. There we go. But let's just do, without attaching the debugger, let's run this again. Just to see what does it look like in sort of a more representative way, right? Let's see here. It might still check for the component cache, but it's going to be faster now. Okay, so here we are. Okay, I'm going to click this again. Did I delete the files? Let's just make sure the files are not here, okay? So show all files. Nope, there is no files. I did delete them fully. So now I'm going to save this file. Save. Boom. And they're there. See, it didn't fold out. It didn't do any of that sort of stuff. They just showed up. Oh, I made a logical error. This should be an or. Silly. Are we on time? OMG. We are like, this is exactly 1 hour. Yes, Jan, I need to make that change. Update less item to Sass item. Where did that go? Here, less item. Sorry. That was pretty ugly. Here we go. All right. So let's see if our logic holds to when I have the file exists on disk, but it might not be part of the solution. Here it is. Okay, so the CSS file exists and is part of the solution, but the min file does not. Let's see if our logic takes care of that scenario. I just save the file, and there it goes. Let's do all this again. Delete everything. Save the file. Click. Boom. So is it fast? Yes, it's pretty fast. And the UI didn't freeze, right? Super important stuff that it doesn't freeze. So I think that's it. Let's just save this. So now we have two different ways. I don't know, James. Let's see here. James, do you have an opinion? Time-wise, we now have an extension that has two different ways of compiling Sass, right, into CSS. Do we have time to look at how we add a setting such that people can choose which one they want?
Sure.
And then we can show a fun thing about that.
Yeah, go for it.
Because how do you put an enum in the setting? I was thinking about that the other day. I don't think I've shown that. And that can be super duper helpful.
Let's do it.
Okay. So let's find a place where we have some options. And this is what I always do. I like copy and paste from like old things so that I make sure that we do the right thing. Code tour. Oh yeah, I was doing some coding this holiday break too. But where do I have some good? My company. Where would I put some options? No. What did we do the other day that had options? Sticky Christmas. Remember that one? Settings. We called them settings. Okay, that'll do. Okay, so I'm going to copy settings. Okay, we got settings. I'm going to just change the namespace from Sticky Christmas to Sass compiler. Okay, there it is. And just need this Sass compiler here. And we have general options. Okay, so this general options, we're now going to say this is the base for this is all we have to care about actually from these settings. This is just this is boilerplate code. All of these are kind of boilerplate. What we care about is this particular file. This is the individual options page. And this one, we're going to now do an enum because we're going to say, what should we say? We should say transpiler method. What method do you want to use? And so we can say specify which type of compilation you want. Let's do that. And that's an enum. So we're going to create an enum. So let's do public enum transpiler method. And the first one is going to be single file generator, because why not? And the next one is going to be manual nesting. Manual file nesting. Okay. And then we're going to have this being our transpiler method, and we're just going to call it method like that. And the default here is what should we say? Let's say it's a single file generator. Doesn't really matter. So we want to put that up here too. This attribute, transpiler method, single file generator. Okay. So that's about it. Then we just need to register this options package somewhere. And again, I'm just going to steal this code. Let's open this file. Go. And let's just plug it in right in here. And where do we want to keep it? We could keep it in something called extensions. So this is about where do we want this to be placed. So if I go to Tools Options, where do I want my options page to show up? Do I want it to show up on its own top level thing like environment? Should it say environment, projects and solutions, and then Sass compiler? Or should Sass compiler be under web something? Okay, I don't know. Let's call it extensions. Jan, you don't like that, Jan? I remember that from last time. That's okay. We're just going to keep it exactly like that. I'm just going to copy paste, not even make a change. And if you want to make that change in your version of this, you are more than welcome to, everybody. In its own top level, Jan says. I don't know. I think we just have one setting. I think that's a lot to take like a whole top level. It would be like, yeah, I don't know. It's too much. Okay, so let's just take a look. So I'm not actually using this setting for anything at the moment. And we'll see here what the problem is and with doing enums, and then we're going to fix it because this is not something that is obvious if you don't know. So Tools Options. Let's see here. And extensions. Sass compiler. See, it's right here. It's a single file generator. Notice how it's going between bold and not bold. That's because whatever is default gets sort of the not bolded, the normal. And if I change it, then it goes here. Then it gets bold, right? So that's kind of cool. So now that's up there. So in order for that to be stored accurately, the problem is that right now it doesn't actually store accurately. And so I need to put in a type converter. That is a type of enum type. Enum, is it enum converter? Is that on this? Provides a type converter for enum. Yep. So whenever you do an enum, make sure to put this one in. Otherwise, it can't translate back when it's stored the information and has to retrieve it again, which of the values. It is not able to match that up unless you have that attribute right here. So just a little hint. This is actually kind of silly because that we have this setting, but we could probably use it for a host of different things. Because really, the way that I make my that I use the single file generator is that I add that custom tool right to the properties. Let's just take a look at that real quick, because there's something a little bit smarter we can do. So if you saw the November episode where we created this in the first place, then you may remember that we added a command that makes it kind of easy to opt into single file generator. You could just right-click any file and say transpile into CSS. And what that would do is that it would basically just set this line right here. That command just sets this custom tool property, which then invokes, when that is there, then every time you save it, it will automatically invoke the single file generator. So that's the way you opt in. But there's no way to opt in or out of the code we just wrote. It takes any SCSS file and compiles it. And so that's not really desirable. For instance, this one that just has variables in it. In itself, it shouldn't produce anything. I don't want any artifacts to be produced. Its main purpose is to be included in other files, right? So it would be cooler if I can do something like this. If I can just using a comment, like, what if I do this? Transpile. If the first line contains a comment that says transpile, then That's why my way of opting in. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So let's go ahead and do that. So where's the good place to do that? Where do we want to read that information? Well, we want to do it as early as possible before we're starting new threads and all this sort of stuff. So the right place for that is actually right here. So I want to come in here and grab the first line of the text buffer, and then I want to see whether or not it contains the word transpile. So I'm just going to create a line equals, and I'm going to say doc.text buffer current snapshot get line from line number 0. It's a 0-based index here, so that just means the first line. So then we can say if line get text contains the word transpile, then we may want to create our, start the whole process here of compiling. There we go. So now, like that. Does that make sense? So now the way to opt into transpilation is to simply just add that little comment there. And I have an extension I wrote some years ago called Less Compiler. You can find it out there on the marketplace and on GitHub. And it did something very similar. And what's really interesting about doing it this way is that you can actually put all these different compiler options into that first comment and then just parse it. You can do syntax like a command line syntax, if you will, like parameter like name equals value or something like that, right? So we can say transpile, okay, I'm making this up, true or whatever. And you can comma out semicolon. You can then say, okay, what are the settings? Do you want source map? Source map, true. So you can compile this, right? And then you can make that part of the options that you pass into the compiler. So let's just see here if this works. So I'm going to delete everything. I'm going to save this file. See, now I get nothing. But if I write transpile and then hit save, boom, there they come. They're right there. So what happened here is I now have a good way of opting in. So this touches on a kind of a different concept, or an interesting concept that is sort of a little bit beside sort of the technical aspect of things, which is what is the right user experience? Like, how do you alert the user to the fact that you have a feature, and so that they have no problem ever finding it? They might have forgotten that they have your extension, right? Or they don't read the description. They were just told by a colleague, hey, go download this extension. It will compile for you your Sass files. Well, how are they going to know that they're going to have to put the comment in there? So there's something you can do to make that easier, which is something we should look into. There's many different ways. One of them is adornments. So we can look at how we do text adornment. So you can imagine that you open a file that has not been opted into, and you can give a little adornment in the corner saying not compiling, for instance. Or the other way around. When it's compiling, it can say that. Sort of a little thing in the editor here, a little piece of text that's sort of overlay, like a watermark or something like that. Yeah, so that was it. That was the first episode of the year, of the decade. No. Yeah,
that's not right. The year. I think there is something for every 10 of something, but did that 10 thing start on 2020? Right. I don't know. It's the age-old today. Index 0 or 1.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was thinking. Like I've been ruined. I used to write Visual Basic back in the 90s, and of course all the arrays there are 1-based, not 0-based. So there is that. Do we have any questions?
Let's see. Oh, we did have one question up here that I was going to find. Where is it at? Someone was asking about the, I don't know where it's at. The task factory. Steffi was asking the joinable task factory. What is that thing? Oh,
that's a great question. Yeah, it's a thing that we want to use over and over again. That's our super important thing. Where did it go? There. So The joinable task factory is something that, Andrew, if you've been watching the Visual Studio remote office hours, the last episode from December, the last of the season, was with Andrew, and he wrote basically how we're doing threading in Visual Studio. Not just him, but I think he was the main guy. And he wrote the joinable task factory, and it's a way that we orchestrate how we do threading such that we don't end up in deadlock situations where you have a UI thread waiting on a background thread that's also waiting on the UI thread, to put it simply. Then you have a deadlock and Visual Studio freezes forever till it crashes, right? So the joinable task factory is the way we handle when you want to do anything where you want to, let's say, do something on a background thread. Don't use the thread pool, even though that's super easy too, right? Or if you want to do like a task, you want to start a task and just call like configure awaits false and just fire, and then do fire and forget that way. It's better to do it this way. Using the joinable task factory basically ensures that we mitigate those potential deadlocks, and we can't foresee them when they happen. It might be that they always work on our machine, but then on other machines they won't. So there's no way of knowing. So just always go for this. I hope that was another question here. Why do we need an abstract class if a new version we can implement interface? That was like 4 below the one that you have currently selected. So this is not an abstract class. This is the interface. If you were talking about the generator, then that's an abstract class. We don't need to use the abstract class, because if we go to the abstract class of the single file generator, we can see that it, in fact, well, that has from this one, base code generator, it has an interface, IVS single file generator. Okay, so you can just use that if you want to, but and that gives you more flexibility, but you have to write a lot more code. At that point, I don't know why you would then do it. So you can. I have never done it. I think it's too ugly, to be honest. Okay. Do we have anything else? Are you using .NET Core? Was one question from the trash man here. No, we're not using .NET Core. We can use .NET Standard 2.0. It has to be compatible with the .NET that Visual Studio is currently compiled against, which is 4.7, I think. So .NET Standard 2.0 will be fine. So you can have a library that's .NET Standard 2.0. But if you're interacting with any of the APIs in Visual Studio, then you have to take a dependency on Visual Studio NuGet packages, and they're all compiled against full framework. And so then you can't do .NET Standard, I think. Not sure. All right, let's see. I think that's it, huh?
I think so.
Yeah.
Cool. You did it.
Yes. I've been looking forward to this pretty much since we did the last episode in the beginning of December.
Because you missed me, mostly.
Yep. Yes. And the viewers. And all these good comments. This is really fun. I love interacting with everyone out there. So please keep the comments coming. And also suggestions, right, for what to do. So I have booked in the next 2 weeks, I think, James, right? I have stuff there. So I think, is it next week? It might be next week or the following week. I'm doing Jan Duran's extensibility log extension, a code review of that one. So that's going to be the second time we're going to do a code review. And thanks for suggesting that, Jan. That's awesome. And if anyone has an extension they'd like to be code reviewed, then please send it my way. James has a link to how to do that. And then we're also going to look at Task Runner Explore and how we can extend that, which is exciting. So that's going to be the following week. I might have flip those two. Maybe Taskbar and Explorers next week. But here's one thing you don't want to miss, and that's Monday. That's this Monday. Because I'll be talking to Bertrand, Leslie, and Tina from the extensibility team about the upcoming new extensibility model in Visual Studio. So come be active on asking questions in the comments. And it's going to be super interesting. I'm looking so much forward to it. We get to ask all those technical, geeky questions, and they can answer them all. So you don't want to miss that. And with that, I think all there is to say is Happy New Year again, and see you next time.